Hello, welcome to Inspiredsiren. Today we will be talking about the book The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. And in the background you will be seeing the game Palia, and I don't have a whole lot full experience of this game, so I'm kind of giving it a try. I'll release an additional video that's a little bit more focused on the game, but something about the vibe of the game felt like a good background to talk about this book. So The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue starts in 1714 in a French village, and it follows a woman named Adeline, Addie LaRue, and kind of where we leave, or where we kind of start the story, like most women, most of the timeline of the world, but especially around this, it's their only purpose is to be a wife and a mom. And while I think her parents, in the book at least, her parents do seem to have some sort of a love with each other, for Addie, she's basically going to be forced into an arranged marriage. So this is kind of just, she and I think she's a little bit older than what would be expected for someone to be married, and she has a really beautiful free spirit, and her dad is a wood carver, so I feel like she also has a little bit of an artsy heart, and she's a little bit of a wild child, and in the most beautiful, special way. She's stubborn and strong, and so she gets basically, okay, you're stuck, you're about to be into this arranged marriage, and that will be your life. And in her little French village, she has a friend there too, that that's what happens, that's their life, they get married and have kids. And so Addie is desperate to kind of get out of this, and as the wedding is approaching, one of the, I guess I would say this is technically the village witch, but I don't know if those words would have actually been used back then. But in my mind, it's the village witch, and this is a badass older woman, who clearly, she's special, she's amazing. Her name is, I think her name is Estelle. I can't fully remember what the old witch lady's name is, but she's trying to foster Addie. She's trying to, I think, inspire her strength, her independence, her abilities, and also she talks about the gods, right? And I think in this timeline in Addie's life, it's kind of a more traditional spiritual sense, and Estelle has a wider range of what maybe would have been considered pagan gods. I'm not fully sure. I'm not an expert on the religions of this time period, but Addie is coming to this older woman, Estelle, and saying what can I do? How can I get out of this? What do I do? And I think her parents are kind of encouraging her, pray to the gods that you were raised with, pray to the good gods, the normal ones, or whatever. And Estelle is yes, pray to these other gods too, whether it's Mother Nature, or at least this is how I was taking it. I don't know if that's exactly what the author intended, but Estelle just gives Addie one warning. She says, okay, whatever you do, whoever you pray with, don't pray to the gods that answer at night. It's something, something about, Estelle is trying to explain to Addie, there's something about who answers at night. And she even goes so far as to say, I think she says something along the lines of no matter how desperate or dire you are, never pray to the gods that answer after dark. And so Addie is holding this, right? She's not doing that. But then it comes to the eve of her wedding, right? And she's so desperate. She's just waiting for one last escape. Also, in case in case you're still paying attention to this and like hoping that there's not going to be spoilers, there is going to be spoilers. I don't know how to do a non-spoiler review. I am not going to talk about everything in the book, and to the point that even if you listen to this whole thing, I think you would still have a really good special experience reading this book, but it is not spoiler free, okay? So if you want spoiler free, this is your last warning. Get out and come back when you've read the book. Okay, so, the Eve, she's desperate, she runs. I don't know if this is what the book said, but in my mind, I have an image of her running, like, barefoot. I know she's in her wedding dress when she does this, but I don't remember if she's barefoot or not, but I just imagine, like, the cold and the mud and the grass. She's running, she runs to the forest. She's trying to pray to the gods that are the daytime gods, but as she's praying, she is so desperate. She closes her eyes, and she doesn't realize when the sun slips below the horizon. She has prayed to the gods that answer after dark. And we later on find that the god that answers her, Addie has named him Luke. So we're going to call him Luke, but he doesn't have a name for a while in the book. So Addie ends up having prayed to Luke, desperately asking for freedom, desperately asking to not be kind of stuck and trapped, but to be able to live a life and to be able to be free. And of course, we know that, like, Luke is going to answer in a way that's not what she really means, right? Like, she wants to be able to be free. And this I would say, be the first time in the book where I paused and I realized, oh, this is a feminist book. Now, we're going to talk about that a little bit more later, but if you are female identifying, I can almost guarantee that there has been a moment, or I don't know, maybe you're got your head in the sand or something, but, and I don't mean that to be harsh, I don't want to be cruel, but if you haven't had this moment, I think it's worth some self-reflection of, like, there is a moment, and I think in every female identifying person's life, where you realize that there is just some stuff that you're going to be trapped by. The end. Like, and you desperately wish that wasn't true. I mean, I think something as simple as, I want to feel like I can be safe everywhere I go. I want to be able to think about not having to worry about how much money I'm making compared to, like, a man. I went into this spiral the other day with some of my friends that are women, and also just more present women, even if they don't fully identify as women, and just, like, how insane the differences between men and women in every aspect. I mean, something simple as, like, health studies, right? We know that so much health stuff has only been studied on male bodies, and that's insane because women bodies and male bodies are really different. And, anyway, I'm getting really off topic. The point is that I think that was the moment I read in this book. She's sitting down and she feels so trapped in her desperation, that I thought, oh man, I don't know any woman that hasn't felt like that. The other thing I realized in this very early moment of the book is that this author, I had never heard of this author. I actually hadn't ever heard of this book. I randomly was looking for a book for the book club that I'm in, and had stumbled upon, like, different fantasy reads, and this one was, like, either really badly reviewed or really, like, extremely well reviewed. I think at some point I read a couple of reviews on this book because I didn't want to get spoilers, so I didn't read any of the spoiler reviews, but there was some reviews of people that were like, well, I guess I'll just go stare at a wall now, or just, like, a bad word, and that was their whole review. And I was like, okay, I think that I should maybe read this and check this out. So along with kind of the feminist realization, I also realized that this author has some of the most poetic and beautiful writing, in which you feel the same thing as the character. In the moment of her desperation of not wanting to get married and Addie's feeling trapped and panicked, you feel that. You feel what she feels. And there's a couple of scenes like this. I think, we'll touch on some of them later, but those are the two really major things that came up quickly. So, of course, Luke decides to grant her desires, and unfortunately, of course, the curse that Addie has now agreed to with Luke, the god that answered after dark, is she can't be remembered, right? So, she walks back to her house, and her dad doesn't recognize her. Her mom doesn't recognize her. She goes, after running away from her immediate family, right? She's in her village, and she goes to Estelle, knocking on like the old witch wise woman's door, and she doesn't recognize her. She doesn't know who she is, and not only do they not recognize her, they can't remember her. So the scene where she's knocking on Estelle's door is one of the more earlier scenes where you realize, oh, out of sight is literally out of mind in this case. She knocks on the door, she's answered, and then she's forgotten. She knocks on the door again, she's answered, but she's forgotten. There is a really sad scene early on too where the scenes with her parents are also pretty heartbreaking, but I don't want to ruin those. You should read the book for those. One of the scenes that's really heartbreaking is with her friend who, at this point, Addie's dirty, cold. She's suddenly coping with this curse. Luke, of course, the cursor, is nowhere to be found at this moment. And Addie gets help from her best friend in the village. Her best friend, she brings her into her house. She wants to give her food and warmth and clothing. And Addie's trying to get her to stay. And her best friend, right, goes into the other room to, I think, get food or water or something. And Addie knows that she's going to be forgotten. And her best friend comes back in and is scared, terrified that Addie is in the house and that the children are there, the best friend's children. And there's just so many moments of this intense experience, especially early on, where Addie is just realizing over and over and over again that people can't remember her if they lose sight of her. And so there is a lot of negative talk on this book. Like I said, the reviews, I feel like, were very divided. It was either like really, really good reviews or really bad reviews. And so many of the bad reviews were about how slow the book is or how repetitive it is. So I think I'm just going to say this now, that the slowness in which you read this book is very important. This is not like a Court of Thorns and Roses, or there's lots of popular books right now. There's lots of TV shows right now where our attention is dragged in and kind of sucked in, and everything is like such high levels of intensity and emotion. And there's not as much depth, and there's not as much time to process. And I think this book requires skills that perhaps we've lost in our growing into our technology, TikTok, 30-second video ways. And so if you read this book, please read it slowly. I read it with my book club, so we read a few chapters every week. I think it took us like 6 or 7 weeks to read it. I can't remember fully, but the slowness is paramount because Schwab writes such beautiful prose. I mean, feels like every line is poetic. Every character has depth. Every feeling, like I said earlier, feels written. So it's visceral and you feel it. And if you go too fast, you'll get bored. It's insane. Like, I think that the reviews that had written badly about this, I don't know. I'm like, maybe you should, go outside in nature. I think our attention is just so divided these days. And this was a book where I think you had to let the attention, like, sit. You had to let yourself read this poetry and experience these feelings. And it spans over 300 years, right? And so we go through various places with Addie. We go through different experiences with Luke, right? So the first few years of Addie's curse, she's trying to understand how to cope with it, right? She has to steal because, she can't be remembered enough to even do something as simple as stay the night somewhere because, she pays a housekeeper, isn't given a receipt, and then the next second she's being kicked out because then the housekeeper doesn't remember her and she has no money left. It's a slog the first few years of her life, and you kind of see Addie trying to defy Luke. Luke is just waiting for her to give up. He's waiting, this is exchange. This deal was an exchange for her soul. And he says, okay, give it, if you give me your soul, great. Like, this will be over. But Addie is strong and stubborn and does not give in. And so, year after year, Luke is trying to break her. And part of this breaking is coming to Addie in this romanticized version that she drew of, like, her ideal man, her freedom. And so it's also, Addie and Luke's relationship is actually one of the most interesting parts of the book for me, which I think could be summed up in, like, well, no, it can't be summed up in anything, because the relationship between Addie and Luke changes consistently. I mean, there are years where Addie, I think, desires Luke to come back more often and to see her and to notice her. I mean, there's one year in her where she basically protects everything that she can save for a year. She sets up this, like, makeshift place because she imagines, okay, he's coming back on the day that we made our deal. He's coming back, and he doesn't come. And then there are other moments in which Addie is at her lowest, because people don't remember her. And I think I forgot to mention this, but the deal made her immortal. So she lives forever. One sec, I have to drink something. She's immortal and also completely forgettable, right? It's just like the opposite ends of these spectrums. And there is one scene where I can't remember exactly what was happening. I think it was maybe some sort of plague or some very intense sickness. And there's a lot of people that have died. And Addie is, of course, like, unable to get shelter and basically is dead to the point someone would see her and think she was dead. And she's carted off in this cart of bodies. And so she, like, comes to, she says, I'm not dead. And she's covered with dead bodies and she's in this cart. And so these experiences, these scenes from her life where she has to understand that she can't be remembered and that she has to live forever, and, like, the tension within that of her head and the way that Luke plays with that and tries to break her. It's art. I mean, it's because you feel everything that she's feeling as you're reading if you go slow. You have to go slow with this book because the prose is so beautifully written and poetic, and the feelings feel so visceral. I mean, I've never read a book like this where I felt the whole thing. Like, I have an amazing life. I have a great life. But But I felt that fear. I felt the tension. I felt like the moments of hope that were then shattered. Like, that's the way that the book runs, and the interplay between her and Luke. Sometimes he comes to her and he's kind, and you're kind of, oh, should I trust him? Like, is he going to turn good? Is he going to let her free? And the other times where he is so cruel. She gets, in one scene, she gets into this party and she's able to eat. She's able to, like, have a moment, and Luke shows up, and he does this thing where he calls her out, right? He calls her out at this party. He gives her this idea, or he spreads this idea that she's basically broken into this party. And this is a moment in which I think is pivotal in the book, because he says something to her. I can't remember the exact line, but he says something to her about how, like, ideas are stickier than memories, because Addie's thinking, oh, I can walk out and everyone will forget about me. But Luke has kind of spread these ideas that she's done something really wrong, and to kind of capture her by these people. And so he's trying to use it as this way to hurt her. And I think the rest of the novel, it kind of plays out that this is how she finds hope. No, people do not remember her, and she can still spread ideas. She can still be a muse, and then it kind of spreads through, I think, many different iterations, and sometimes it's very clear and direct, and sometimes it doesn't really state explicitly, but you can kind of find different art pieces throughout the book, different songs, where she's woken up, and of course the person that she spent the night with doesn't remember her, but she's playing a song, right? And she now this musician that she spent the night with, she plays this song, and the song becomes real. The song is the way that she's in the world. That's the other thing, is that part of her curse is that she can't say her name, and she also can't record anything. So she can't write things down. It's like almost as she is an invisible person, right? That's the whole premise of the book. But others can write about her. Others can have this muse, have this song, have this sculpture created that she has a mark on, even if no one remembers. So all that to be said, that it is slow. It's a slow build up. I think part of that also feels like what it feels like to be a woman to me, where you have to consistently try extremely hard, and whether you actually get anything back, whether you're acknowledged, whether you're safe, whether you are okay, is always in question. But you can't give up, because that's also not an option. At some point along the ways, Addie meets this person named Henry. She shoplifts at a bookstore. Henry, the book clerk, of course, the first day, okay, great. He's like, okay, sure, you can have the book. Then Addie goes back to exchange the book, pretend to exchange the book, get a new book. And Henry is not having any of it. He's saying, oh, you shoplifted. And Addie is so confused, because no one has remembered her for 300 years, right? Like, this is an anomaly. And she's trying to navigate this. She's trying to explain it. And then Henry, just like this haunting scene where he looks up and he says, I remember you. And so starts this cycle of her actually being remembered by someone. And Henry ends up having been cursed by Luke too. And, you know that this isn't going to end well. Like, you're sitting there thinking, oh, okay, like someone remembers her. This must be really special. And Addie herself thinks, oh, Luke has made a mistake. He didn't realize that Henry's curse, which is a whole nother thing, I guess we should talk about Henry's curse, actually. So Henry's curse is basically that people see him and he's everything they need, right? He's like, he needs to go to therapy. Henry should have had a lot of mental health work with a lot of his life, and he's desperate for people to love him. And basically he asks for, on a scary, scary night where he may have harmed or killed himself, he asks for, I just want people to love me. I just want people to know. And so he's cursed. It briefly mentions it through things he talks about. One thing that I did not like about this book is that I did feel like there was no acknowledgement about the fact that Henry's curse, basically people kind of fall at his feet, including women. And I don't know how I feel about that, because it does feel like consent isn't a thing, and that makes me feel really uncomfortable. So I do want to acknowledge that. The other part of this book that I do think is lacking, and I don't fully understand how to think about it or hold it, is that there is some lack of diversity. I think there's a couple of characters of couple. I think there's a couple of queer characters, but we're going for 300 years from 1714 to basically current times. And aside from the obvious experience of sexism, there isn't a full range or depth of what it's like. She basically is in France and New York, right? There just could be other places in the world that things could happen. There could be other scenes, and I will be honest with you, I did not fully notice that until I was talking to our book club and my partner, who is a person of color, and just some of the erasure of that. And so I want to make a note that I still don't fully, I can't fully understand or relate to this. And also, this book is still really incredible. And so apart from those pieces, those were the pieces that I had a really hard time with, right? We fall in love with Henry. Actually, most people in my book club didn't like him, but I don't know. I thought he was fine. But the point is, Henry, his curse is part of why he remembers Addie, because what Addie most wants is for someone to remember her, in theory. And so Luke is behind this. And also, there's still part of you that thinks, but what if he's not? And I think Addie herself kind of goes through up and down with intense fear that Luke will catch them. Intense fear that Luke will find out that Henry remembers her and take it away. And in the end, he does. But the tension between when Addie is discovering this and basically falling in love with Henry in a way that actually is pretty new for her because she's remembered, you're just waiting for the shoe to drop. And in the end, and also I have missed a lot of stuff. This book is so beautifully written. You have to just read it to get the full thing. I'm just doing a brief overview because there is a way more crap in there than this. But in the end, right, we do find out, okay, Luke orchestrated this, and Henry's curse, which is the reason why he remembers Addie, came with a caveat that it's 30 days, right? After 30 days, Luke gets to take Henry's soul. Addie, of course, will have had this glimpse of a life of being remembered, and it'll be gone. And you kind of go back and forth with trying to understand what's gonna happen. How am I gonna see these characters develop? It feels like a trap. It feels like there's no way out. And yeah. So I won't fully spoil the ending, but I will say that in the end, because Henry could remember Addie, even though the stuff with Luke ends up with them splitting in the end, Henry does write Addie's story, and he writes her name, and she's left a mark, and she's able to be remembered through this book. But Addie does end up again in the clutches of Luke. However, I will say I think that the ending, I still felt like Addie was a badass. She words things when she makes this deal with Luke to let Henry live, basically. She makes a deal, but she doesn't give up her soul, and she's very careful about how she writes. And I think the very, very end of the book, you can tell Addie has not given up. You know, she stumbles across Henry's book in a bookstore. She recognizes that it's read, or that it's her, it's her words, it's her life, it's her name. And in the end, there's no real satisfaction or freedom for Addie. But you also know that she hasn't given up. And I noticed that the men in the book club that I am in had a really hard time with this ending and felt really unsatisfied by it and felt like, oh, like it could have been so different. Like, and I realized that the women had a really different experience because it is unsatisfying. In the end, Addie does not win, but she doesn't give up. And there is nothing more feminist than that. Addie does not win, but she doesn't give up. Honestly, it's been one of my favorite reads probably that I've ever written. It's beautiful. It sweeps you away. The feminism is subtle and strong, and that's the only appropriate way that feminism is even understood or accepted, usually. And the strength of her, even in the darkest of situations, even in the very, very end, when being remembered is taken from her, when being known is taken from her, she doesn't give up. I just think that is, I don't know, it was hopeful. It was hopeful. And it made me feel like someone understands what it feels like to be a woman. And, oh my gosh, I'm like bordering on tearing up while I'm talking about it. And I think, you know, part of the reason for that is because it doesn't feel like you're allowed to be a person. It feels like feminism is a great concept, but it feels like sexism is winning lately. And there was just something about this book where, ironically, it made me feel not invisible. And I think that there is problems with it, with lacking diversity. There isn't a lot of, I would say, actual, they don't talk about some things that I think that they really need to, and it would be great. And this book was beautiful. I felt seen. I felt empowered. I cried. I was mad. I was happy. Like, it was just all over the motions. I truly feel the bad reviews are due to someone not being able to fully understand the intensity of this curse, or the repetitiveness of this curse, or the constant slug that Addie has in being cursed in this way, where she can't get out. It's horribly exhausting, and also she can't stop. Or maybe part of this is just my own experiences, and that's why I just don't understand the bad reviews. I also will say that I on habit tend to be a more positive book reviewer. I really love stories. I love escaping. That's literally why I started this YouTube channel. But I think the slowness that you need is not common these days. And I think the more complex being a female, the intense feelings, it just takes some emotional bandwidth and some emotional experience that I think maybe not everybody has, which is okay. So there's this one quote I want to end with, and again, there's no way I could fully capture this book. This book is a insanely amazing read. Please go read it. If you haven't already, give it a chance. Read it slowly. Don't forget. But it talks about in the end, and I'm just going to read a quote from the book. It says, she is tired, but has lived. Nothing is all good or all bad. Life is so much messier than that. And there in the dark, he asks if it was really worth it. Were the instants of joy worth the stretches of sorrow? Were the moments of beauty worth the years of pain? And she says, always. Thank you for listening. This has been Let's Talk Books with Inspiredsiren. If you haven't already, please leave me a comment or a like. Also, if you subscribe, I would love to see you. I'm releasing videos every Friday, and I will see you then.